The restaurant kitchen was my sanctuary and my prison. Steam billowed around me as I plunged another stack of plates into scalding water, my fingers red and raw despite the thin rubber gloves. The cacophony of shouts from the line cooks, clinking glasses, and the steady thrum of expensive conversation from the dining room created a familiar white noise that had become the soundtrack of my existence. "Harper, table 7 needs fresh napkins." Marco, the floor manager, barked as he pushed through the swinging doors. I nodded, not bothering to remind him that I was hired as a dishwasher, not waitstaff. At Bellissimo, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in Manhattan, everyone did whatever was needed to keep the machine running smoothly, especially those of us at the bottom. "Just give me a minute to finish. Now, Harper." I peeled off my soaked gloves, wiped my hands on my already damp apron, and grabbed a stack of pristine white napkins from the service station. My reflection caught in the polished steel of the refrigerator door, stringy blonde hair hastily pinned back, dark circles under eyes that had once been bright, a smudge of something on my cheek. 26 years old, and I looked a decade older. This wasn't the life I'd imagined when I moved to New York with dreams of becoming a chef. But dreams don't pay rent or medical bills. The dining room was a different world. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over cream-colored walls, adorned with original artwork. The air was perfumed with truffle oil, fresh herbs, and expensive cologne. I kept my eyes down as I weaved between tables of beautiful people who never really saw me. That's how I preferred it. Invisible. Safe in plain sight. As I approached table 7, the conversation hushed. Something in the atmosphere shifted, like the pressure drop before a thunderstorm. Without looking up, I could feel eyes on me, assessing, calculating. "Your napkins, sir," I murmured, carefully placing them on the edge of the table. "Look at me when you speak." The voice was quiet, yet filled the space between us like smoke. Smooth, dangerous, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent. My body reacted before my mind could process the command, my head lifting automatically. He sat at the head of the table, surrounded by 4 men in expensive suits, who seemed to lean away from him slightly, as if granting him an invisible bubble of authority. Dark hair, styled perfectly. Strong jaw shadowed with precisely maintained stubble. A mouth that might have been sculpted by an artist, with an obsession for creating the perfect balance between cruelty and sensuality. But it was his eyes that trapped me. Dark amber, like whiskey held up to firelight, and just as intoxicating. I'm sorry," I stammered, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. One corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement or contempt. "Your apology is accepted." My cheeks burned as I felt the other men at the table exchange glances. Whatever game was being played, I wasn't privy to the rules. "Will there be anything else?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "That depends." He tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Do you always look so exhausted?" The question caught me off guard. No one asked personal questions here, especially not the type of clientele who frequented Bellissimo. They ordered, they ate, they paid obscene amounts of money. They left. They didn't notice people like me. "I'm fine," I replied automatically, the lie as familiar as my own heartbeat. "I didn't ask if you were fine." His voice remained soft, but something in it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "I asked if you always look exhausted." One of the men at the table shifted uncomfortably. "Dante, perhaps we should—" A slight movement of his hand silenced the man instantly. "Dante." The name reverberated through my consciousness, stirring something vague and frightening. "Yes," I admitted, the word escaping before I could stop it. "I always look like this." He nodded once, as if I had confirmed something important. "What's your name?" "Harper." "Harper," he repeated, and somehow my ordinary name transformed into something exotic on his tongue. "Bring me a glass of water. No ice." I retreated gratefully, feeling as though I'd just narrowly avoided some unseen danger. In the relative safety of the service station, I filled a crystal water glass with trembling hands. What had just happened? Why had he singled me out? Marco appeared at my elbow, his face drained of color. "Do you know who that is?" he hissed, nodding toward table 7. I shook my head. Dante Russo. The Dante Russo. The name still meant nothing to me, but Marco's reaction told me everything I needed to know. Whoever he was powerful, dangerous. Just serve him and get back to the kitchen, Marco whispered, eyes darting nervously toward the table. Don't make eye contact again. I returned with the water, careful to keep my gaze fixed on the pristine white tablecloth as I placed it before him. Thank you, Harper. My name again, deliberately used. I nodded and turned to leave when his voice stopped me. You dropped something. I glanced back, confused. I hadn't been carrying anything except the water. He held up a small white card between 2 fingers. Your tip. I don't accept tips, I stammered. I'm not waitstaff. Take it. Not a request. I reached for the card, expecting him to release it, but his fingers held firm, forcing me to meet his gaze again. Those amber eyes seemed to see straight through the careful walls I'd built around myself. Until next time, he said quietly, finally relinquishing the card. I mumbled something unintelligible and retreated to the kitchen, clutching the card in my fist. Only when I was safely hidden in the staff bathroom did I examine it. It wasn't money. It was a business card, heavy cream cardstock with just a phone number embossed in dark gold. No name, no company. I flipped it over. Nothing. My shift ended at midnight. I shoved the mysterious card deep into my pocket and gathered my things, exchanging tired goodbyes with the remaining kitchen staff. The November air bit through my thin jacket as I stepped out into the alley behind the restaurant. I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck and started the 15-block walk to my apartment, too broke to justify a subway ride for such a short distance. The city hummed around me, never truly sleeping. I kept my head down, keys clutched between my fingers in the universal posture of women walking alone at night. 3 blocks from the restaurant, I became aware of a car moving slowly alongside me, sleek, black, expensive. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside, but I quickened my pace anyway, heart hammering against my ribs. The car pulled ahead and stopped at the curb. The rear door opened. I froze, my body torn between fight and flight, when a familiar figure emerged, not Dante, but one of the men from his table, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that suggested he'd broken his nose more than once. "Miss Harper," he called, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone so imposing. "Mr. Russo would like to offer you a ride home." I glanced around the empty street. "No, thank you. I prefer to walk." The man sighed as if my response was both expected and tiresome. "It's late, and this neighborhood isn't safe for a woman alone." "I do this every night," I replied, trying to inject confidence into my voice. Not anymore. A different voice from inside the car. Despite every instinct screaming at me to run, I found myself drawn forward until I could see into the shadowy interior. Dante Russo sat there, his presence somehow filling the entire space. A phone glowed in his hand, illuminating his features from below in a way that emphasized the sharp angles of his face. "Get in, Harper. It's cold, and you're shivering." I was shivering, but not from the cold. I don't accept rides from strangers. "We're not strangers. You served me water." A smile played at the corner of his mouth, as if we were sharing a private joke. "Besides, I know where you work, what you're called, and—" He glanced down at his phone. "Where you live. 227 East 42nd Street, apartment 4B. A rather dismal building, from what I understand." Ice filled my veins. "How do you know where I live?" "I know everything I choose to know." He said it simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Now please, get in the car before you catch pneumonia. Medical bills are the last thing you need right now." The casual reference to my financial situation sent another chill through me. How much did he know? Why was he interested in me? And most importantly, did I have any real choice in the matter? I looked again at the man holding the door, at his expressionless face, and the slight bulge under his jacket that suggested he was armed, then back to Dante, who waited with the infinite patience of someone unaccustomed to being refused. "Just a ride home," I said finally. "Nothing else." "Just a ride," he agreed, sliding over to make room. The interior of the car was warm and smelled of leather and something woodsy. His cologne, I realized. The door closed behind me with a soft, expensive thunk, sealing me in with him. The privacy divider was up, leaving us alone in the back seat as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. "You seem nervous," he observed after a moment of silence. "I don't usually get into cars with men I just met." Wise policy. He turned slightly toward me, one arm stretched along the back of the seat. "Tell me, Harper, why do you work at Bellissimo?" The question seemed innocent enough. "I need the money." "Everyone needs money. Why that particular restaurant?" I shrugged, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. "They hired me." "You're not trained as a dishwasher." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "No. I came to New York to be a chef. Things didn't work out. Because of your father's medical bills." I jerked my head toward him, alarm coursing through me. "How do you—" As I said, "I know what I choose to know." He studied me for a long moment. "You're drowning, Harper. Working 60 hours a week and still barely keeping your head above water. Sending most of your money to a hospice in Ohio that's providing care your father's insurance won't cover." My mouth went dry. "Why are you doing this? Why me?" The car slowed to a stop, and I realized with surprise that we were already outside my building. Dante didn't immediately answer, his eyes moving over my face as if memorizing each feature. "Because you were invisible," he said finally. "Until suddenly, you weren't." Before I could process his cryptic response, he reached past me and opened my door. "Rest well, Harper. You won't be returning to Bellissimo." "What?" "But I need that job." "No," he corrected gently. "You needed that job. Past tense. Things have changed. You can't just decide that for me." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "I already have. 7 a.m. tomorrow. This car will be waiting. Don't make me come up to get you." With that, he reached across me and pulled the door wider, a clear dismissal. I stumbled out onto the sidewalk, anger and confusion warring within me. "Wait," I called as the door began to close. "What if I don't come down tomorrow?" Dante leaned forward, the dim streetlight casting shadows across his face. "Then you'll discover just how persistent I can be." The door closed, and the black car melted back into the night traffic, leaving me alone with questions that burned like fire in my mind. What had just happened? What did he want from me? And why did I feel, with absolute certainty, that my life had just irreversibly changed? I climbed the 4 flights to my apartment, each step heavier than the last. Inside the cramped studio that consumed half my monthly income, I collapsed onto my second-hand couch and pulled out the cream-colored card he'd given me. The gold numbers seemed to shimmer in the dim light, like a key to a door I wasn't sure I wanted to open. Whatever game Dante Russo was playing, I was now a piece on his board, and I had the sinking feeling that he never, ever lost. Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed and turned in my narrow bed, Dante Russo's amber eyes haunting me whenever I closed my own. By the time weak morning light filtered through my threadbare curtains, I had cycled through every emotion: fear, anger, curiosity, and a disturbing undercurrent of anticipation that I refused to acknowledge. The rational part of my brain screamed that I should call Marco, beg for my job back, and pretend last night never happened. But something deeper, more primitive, knew it was already too late. When Dante Russo said he would be persistent, it hadn't been a threat. It had been a simple statement of fact. At 6:50 a.m., I stood at my window, peering down at the street. No black car yet. I had dressed carefully in the best clothes I owned. Black pants that were only slightly faded, a cream blouse I'd found at a thrift store that still had its original tags, and my one pair of decent shoes. My hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, face scrubbed clean with the barest hint of mascara. Whatever Dante wanted, I wouldn't appear desperate or intimidated. At precisely 7 o'clock, the sleek black car slid to a stop in front of my building. Not a minute early or late. The message was clear. Dante Russo controlled even time itself. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and headed downstairs. No one was holding the door open this time. I hesitated on the sidewalk, wondering if I should just walk away, when the rear window lowered. "Good morning, Harper." Dante's voice carried across the space between us, smooth and commanding even in its quietness. He wore a different suit today, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe, a crisp white shirt open at the collar. No tie. The casual elegance made him seem more approachable, which I suspected was intentional and entirely misleading. "You said you'd come up if I didn't come down," I said, remaining where I stood. "That sounds like coercion." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I prefer to think of it as motivation. Are you going to stand on the sidewalk all morning?" "That depends on where we're going and why." "Breakfast," he replied simply. "And then I have a proposition for you." "I don't need charity." His expression hardened slightly. "Don't insult me, Harper. I don't do charity." The ice in his tone made me shiver, despite the morning sun warming my back. I had offended him, I realized. Something that was probably unwise. "I apologize," I said stiffly. "But I still don't understand what you want from me." "Understanding requires information, which I'm prepared to give you over breakfast." He pushed open the door. "Unless you'd prefer to continue this conversation on the street where my driver can hear every word." I glanced at the front of the car, where the same broad-shouldered man from last night sat watching us in the rearview mirror. With a sigh of resignation, I slid into the back seat. "Smart choice," Dante murmured as the car pulled away from the curb. The interior smelled of him, that woodsy cologne mixed with something uniquely masculine. It was disorienting to be so close to him in the morning light, where I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, the tiny scar at the corner of his right eyebrow, the way his stubble was slightly darker along his jawline. "You're staring," he observed, amusement coloring his voice. I quickly looked away. "I'm trying to figure you out. And what have you concluded? That you're used to getting your way, that you're dangerous, that I should probably be running in the opposite direction." He laughed then, a rich sound that seemed to fill the confined space. "All true. Yet here you are. Here I am," I echoed, suddenly aware of how surreal this situation was. 24 hours ago, I had been anonymous, invisible. Now I was in the back of a luxury car with a man whose very presence radiated power and danger in equal measure. We drove to the Upper East Side, stopping in front of a nondescript building with no signage. A doorman in an understated black suit opened Dante's door with a respectful nod. "Good morning, Mr. Russo. Giovanni." Dante acknowledged him with a slight inclination of his head. "We'll be in the private dining room." "Of course, sir. Everything is prepared as you requested." I followed Dante through a discreet entrance and into a small, elegant restaurant that wasn't open to the public. That much was obvious from the absence of staff, except for a single waiter who materialized silently to lead us to a secluded room at the back. The space was intimate, with just one table set for two, by a window overlooking a small courtyard garden. Fresh flowers perfumed the air, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. Dante pulled out my chair, an oddly gentlemanly gesture that caught me off guard. I sat, immediately aware of the plush comfort of the chair, the quality of the linen tablecloth, the weight of the silver cutlery. This was wealth beyond ostentation, the quiet, assured kind that had no need to announce itself. "Coffee?" he asked as the waiter poured from a silver pot. I nodded, watching as the dark liquid filled my cup. "Thank you." We sat in silence until the waiter departed, closing the door behind him. Dante studied me over the rim of his cup, his gaze so intense I had to resist the urge to squirm. "You have questions," he stated finally. "About 1,000,000 of them," I replied. "Starting with, who are you really, and why am I here?" He set down his cup with deliberate care. "I am exactly who Marco told you, Dante Russo. As for what that means," he paused, considering his words. "I have interests in various businesses throughout the city. Real estate, import or export, private security, entertainment." The vague description told me nothing and everything at once. I wasn't naive. Growing up in a small Ohio town didn't mean I was completely sheltered. I'd watched enough movies to read between the lines. "You're in the Mafia," I said flatly. His expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "That's a rather outdated term." "Is it inaccurate? Let's say I'm a businessman who operates outside certain constraints." "A criminal, then?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Careful, Harper. There are questions you don't want answers to." The warning was clear, but something reckless had taken hold of me. If you're trying to frighten me, it's working. But I still deserve to know why I'm sitting here instead of washing dishes at Bellissimo. Dante regarded me for a long moment, then surprised me with a genuine smile that transformed his entire face, making him look younger, almost boyish. You have courage. I like that. The waiter returned with plates of food I hadn't ordered, delicate crepes with fresh berries, eggs Benedict with perfectly poached eggs, crispy bacon, and toast so light it practically dissolved on my tongue when I finally gave in to the hunger gnawing at my stomach. To answer your question, Dante continued once we were alone again, you're here because I need someone with your particular skills. I nearly choked on my coffee. My skills as a dishwasher? Your skills as a chef. The statement caught me completely off guard. How did you? I told you. I know what I choose to know. He cut into his eggs with surgical precision. You graduated top of your class from the Culinary Institute of America. You specialized in Italian cuisine, did an internship in Florence, and were offered a position at 11 Madison Park before your father's diagnosis forced you to abandon your career. My appetite vanished as cold dread pooled in my stomach. It was one thing to know where I lived, quite another to know the intimate details of my past. You've been investigating me. I prefer to call it due diligence. Why? He patted his lips with a napkin before answering. I recently acquired a property in the meatpacking district. I'm converting it into a restaurant. High-end Italian cuisine with a modern twist. I need an executive chef. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. You want me to be your chef? But I haven't cooked professionally in over 2 years. I've been washing dishes, for God's sake. A temporary setback. Your talent doesn't simply vanish. You've never even tasted my food. I don't need to. Your professors spoke very highly of you. As did Chef Rossi in Florence. My head was spinning. This makes no sense. There are hundreds of qualified chefs in New York who would jump at this opportunity. Why choose someone who's been out of the industry for years? Dante leaned forward, his eyes never leaving mine. Because none of them is you. Something in his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, made my skin flush hot and then cold. There was more to this proposition than he was saying. What's the real reason? I pressed. And please don't insult my intelligence with more vague answers. He seemed to consider this request, then nodded once as if coming to a decision. Very well. Complete honesty then. I saw you 6 months ago delivering a catering order to an associate's office. You were different then, vibrant, passionate as you explained the dishes you'd prepared. I found myself intrigued. A chill ran through me. You've been watching me for 6 months? Not constantly, he replied, as if that made it any less disturbing. I had more pressing matters to attend to. But when the opportunity to acquire the restaurant space arose, I remembered you. It seemed fortuitous. Fortuitous, I repeated numbly. You stalked me for half a year, and you call that fortuitous? His expression darkened. I did not stalk you. I merely kept track of your situation. And decided to what? Swoop in and save me? Play the white knight for the damsel in distress? I told you before, I don't do charity, he snapped, an edge of irritation finally breaking through his composed facade. This is business. I need a chef with passion and talent. You need a way out of your financial quicksand. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. I wanted to argue, to throw his proposition back in his face and walk out. But the reality of my situation crashed over me like a wave. My father's hospice care cost more each month than I could possibly earn washing dishes. I was drowning in debt, one missed payment away from disaster. What exactly would this job entail? I asked finally. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. You would have complete creative control over the menu. State-of-the-art kitchen, top-quality ingredients, a skilled staff at your disposal. The salary would be substantial. How substantial? He named a figure that made me grip the edge of the table for support. It was more money than I'd ever imagined earning, enough to cover my father's care with plenty left over. And what's expected of me in return, besides running your kitchen? His eyes narrowed. What exactly are you implying? I don't know, I admitted, But men like you don't make offers like this without wanting something in return. Men like me, he echoed, his voice dangerously soft. You know nothing about men like me, Harper. Then enlighten me. He stood abruptly, buttoning his suit jacket in one fluid motion. Finish your breakfast. There's somewhere I need to take you. The sudden shift threw me off balance. Where? To see your new kitchen. We left the restaurant through a different door than we had entered, emerging into the courtyard garden I had glimpsed from the window. Dante's driver was waiting with the car, door already open. As we approached, I noticed another man standing nearby, scanning our surroundings with watchful eyes. Another bodyguard, I realized. Dante moved through the world encircled by a protective barrier of muscle and weaponry. The drive was silent, Dante absorbed in his phone while I gazed out at the city passing by. We traveled south and west, eventually pulling up in front of a handsome brick building with large windows. A construction crew was busy inside, the rhythmic sound of hammering audible even through the closed car windows. Come, Dante said, finally tucking his phone away. I want to show you what could be yours. The space was vast and flooded with natural light. Workers paused their tasks as we entered, nodding respectfully to Dante before resuming their work. He led me past partially constructed dining areas to the back of the building, where the kitchen was taking shape. I stopped in the doorway, my breath catching. It was magnificent, twice the size of Bellissimo's kitchen, with top-of-the-line equipment still in its protective wrapping. A massive island dominated the center, its marble surface gleaming under the industrial lighting. Walk-in refrigerators and freezers lined one wall, while another featured a wood-burning pizza oven being installed by skilled craftsmen. This is... Words failed me. Yours, Dante finished, watching my reaction closely. If you want it. I ran my fingers along the edge of the island, imagining myself working here, creating the kind of food I'd dreamed of since I was a child, watching my Italian grandmother roll pasta dough at our kitchen table. The yearning was so intense it was almost painful. Why me? I whispered, voicing the question that had been haunting me since his proposition. The real reason. Dante moved closer, his presence enveloping me like a shadow. Because when I saw you all those months ago, I recognized something in you, a fire. The same fire that burns in me. His voice dropped lower, and because since that day, I haven't been able to get you out of my mind. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and unexpected. I turned to face him, finding myself closer than I'd anticipated, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his eyes, to feel the warmth radiating from his body. That's not a business reason, I said quietly. No, he agreed. It's not. Something shifted in the atmosphere, a current of electricity humming beneath the surface. Warning bells clanged in my mind, but they seemed distant, muffled by the blood rushing in my ears. Mr. Russo. A voice broke the moment, pulling us apart. One of the bodyguards stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. The contractor needs your input on the bar design. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly before he nodded. I'll be right there. He turned back to me. Think about my offer, Harper. Take all the time you need. He reached into his pocket and produced a set of keys, pressing them into my palm. His fingers lingered against mine, warm and firm. The address is on the tag. Come here anytime, day or night. The security team knows to expect you. I haven't said yes yet, I reminded him. His lips curved into that confident, knowing smile that both irritated and fascinated me. But you will. With that, he walked away, leaving me alone in what could be my kitchen, keys clutched in my hand like a lifeline or a shackle, I wasn't sure which. I spent 3 days avoiding Dante Russo's offer, 3 days of pacing my tiny apartment, staring at the keys he'd given me, picking up my phone to call the number on his cream-colored business card, then putting it down again. 3 days of arguing with myself about the morality of working for a man who clearly operated outside the law. 3 days of calculating exactly how many years it would take me to pay off my father's medical bills on a dishwasher's salary versus the obscene amount Dante had offered. On the 4th day, my landlord slipped an eviction warning under my door. Rent was late. Again. That evening, I found myself standing outside the restaurant, keys in hand, watching construction workers filter out after their shift. The foreman nodded to me as if he'd been expecting me. "Miss Harper," he said respectfully, "Mr. Russo mentioned you might stop by. Feel free to look around as long as you like. The security team is aware you have access." I thanked him, waited until the last worker had left, then unlocked the door with trembling fingers. The space was different in the evening light. Shadows gathered in corners, but the kitchen gleamed under the industrial lighting that remained on even after hours. I ran my fingers over the smooth countertops, opened cabinets stocked with high-end cookware, examined the 6-burner range that probably cost more than a year's rent. Almost without conscious thought, I found myself opening the refrigerator, which was surprisingly stocked with fresh ingredients: vegetables, herbs, imported cheeses, and cuts of meat. A test, I realized. Dante had prepared for my eventual curiosity. Before I could talk myself out of it, I removed my jacket, rolled up my sleeves, and got to work. Cooking had always been my meditation, my therapy, my connection to my heritage. My grandmother had been from a small village near Naples, and her hands had taught mine to feel when pasta dough was perfect, to understand that timing was everything with risotto, to know that the simplest ingredients could create magic when treated with respect. I lost myself in the familiar rhythm, chopping onions and garlic with practiced precision, the knife an extension of my hand. I seared veal medallions until they developed a perfect crust, deglazed the pan with Marsala wine, added mushrooms and herbs. The scent of rosemary and thyme filled the kitchen, mingling with the rich aroma of reducing wine. I was so absorbed in my task that I didn't notice I was no longer alone until I felt the weight of someone's gaze on my back. I turned, heart leaping to my throat, to find Dante leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest. He had loosened his tie and rolled up the sleeves of his shirt, exposing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. His eyes moved from me to the plates I was preparing, his expression unreadable. "I didn't hear you come in," I said, embarrassed at being caught. "Clearly." He pushed off from the doorway and approached, moving with that predatory grace that seemed so natural to him. "It smells incredible." I busied myself with plating, suddenly self-conscious. "It's just a simple veal saltimbocca, nothing fancy." "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the plate I'd just finished. I nodded, holding my breath as he picked up a fork and took a bite. His eyes closed briefly, and something like pleasure washed over his features before he schooled them back into their usual composure. "This," he said after swallowing, "is not just anything. This is exceptional." The praise warmed me more than it should have. "Thank you." "So," he said, setting down the fork, "have you made your decision?" I wiped my hands on a towel, buying time. "I have questions first." "Of course you do." He sounded more amused than annoyed. "Ask." "Is this restaurant legitimate? I mean, will it be a real business, or is it just a front for illegal activities?" he finished, raising an eyebrow. "It's a legitimate business venture, Harper. Every permit filed properly, every tax paid on time. But your other businesses are not your concern." His tone hardened. "You will be the executive chef of an upscale Italian restaurant. What I do elsewhere is separate." I nodded, accepting the boundary he'd established. "And I'd have complete creative control over the menu? Within reason. I expect certain staples of Italian cuisine to be represented, but with your own interpretation. Who would handle the business side? I've hired a general manager with extensive experience, Sofia Valentini. You'll meet her soon." Another question burned on my tongue, one I wasn't sure I should ask, but in for a penny, in for a pound. "Why did you really choose me, Dante? And don't say it's just because you saw me once delivering catering." Something shifted in his expression. A flicker of surprise, perhaps at my directness or my use of his first name. He considered me for a long moment before answering. "You remind me of someone," he said finally. "Someone I knew a long time ago." "Who?" "My mother." The admission seemed to cost him something. She was a chef as well, before she died. She had the same passion I see in you. The revelation caught me off guard. It was the first personal detail he'd shared, a tiny crack in his impenetrable facade. "I'm sorry about your mother." He dismissed my sympathy with a slight wave of his hand. "It was many years ago. Is that why you're opening a restaurant? In her memory, his jaw tightened. I told you it's a business venture. But I'd seen something in his eyes. A flash of vulnerability quickly masked. There was more to this story. More to him than the dangerous, controlled exterior he presented to the world. I'll take the job, I said suddenly, surprising myself. Dante nodded, as if he'd never doubted my acceptance. Good. You'll start immediately. The restaurant opens in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? I nearly choked. That's impossible. We need time to develop the menu, hire staff, train everyone. All in progress. Sophia has been interviewing staff. I've secured commitments from the best sous chefs in the city. All that was missing was you. My head spun with the implications. You were that certain I'd say yes? That enigmatic smile played at his lips again. I've learned to prepare for desired outcomes. The way he said desired sent an unwelcome shiver down my spine. I turned away, busying myself with cleaning up, uncomfortable with the direction my thoughts were taking. There's one more thing, Dante said, his voice closer now. I turned to find him just behind me, near enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. Your apartment. What about it? It's unsuitable. You'll be working late hours. The building isn't safe, especially for a woman alone. I bristled at his presumption. I've managed fine so far. You'll be moving to a more appropriate location. It wasn't a suggestion. I can't afford a better place, even with the salary you're offering. Not with my father's bills. It's taken care of. What does that mean? It means, he said with exaggerated patience, that I own a building in Chelsea. There's a vacant apartment on the 5th floor. It's yours. I took a step back, bumping into the counter. I can't accept that. You can, and you will. Consider it part of your compensation package. Dante, this is too much. People will think... I don't care what people think, he interrupted, his voice sharp. And neither should you. I care what I think, I countered. And I think accepting an apartment from my boss crosses a line. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. And what line would that be, Harper? The air between us seemed to charge with electricity. I was acutely aware of how alone we were, how close he stood, how his presence seemed to fill the entire kitchen despite its size. The line between professional and personal, I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. Dante studied me for a long moment, his amber eyes boring into mine as if he could read my thoughts. Finally, he stepped back, giving me room to breathe. Very well. The apartment will be leased to you at market rate, with the cost deducted from your salary. Will that satisfy your professional boundaries? It was a concession, albeit a small one. I nodded, not entirely trusting my voice. Good. You'll move in tomorrow. My security team will assist with your belongings. He checked his watch, a sleek timepiece that probably cost more than my entire life's savings. It's late. I'll drive you home. The offer, or command, brooked no argument. I cleaned up quickly, covering the remaining food and storing it in the refrigerator. Dante watched me work, his gaze a physical weight on my skin. Outside, his driver waited with the now familiar black car. The night air was crisp with the promise of winter, and I pulled my inadequate jacket tighter around me. Without a word, Dante removed his suit jacket and placed it over my shoulders. The fabric was warm from his body, the lining silk against my skin, his scent enveloping me. I'm fine, I protested weakly. You're shivering, he countered, opening the car door for me. The drive to my apartment was silent, but charged with unspoken tension. When we arrived, Dante insisted on walking me to my door, his hand a ghostly presence at the small of my back, not quite touching but close enough that I could feel the heat of it through my clothes. My team will be here at 10 a.m. tomorrow, he said, as I unlocked my door. Pack only what you need. Anything else can be replaced. I turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close we were in the narrow hallway, of how his height forced me to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. Thank you for the opportunity, I said formally, trying to establish some semblance of a normal employer-employee relationship. Don't thank me yet, he replied, his voice low. You haven't seen what I expect from you. The ambiguity of his statement hung in the air between us, Before I could respond, he reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek for the briefest moment. "Until tomorrow, Harper." He turned and walked away, leaving me frozen in my doorway, his jacket still draped around my shoulders, his touch burning on my skin. True to his word, Dante's team arrived precisely at 10 a.m. the next morning. 2 burly men in suits who introduced themselves only as Marcus and Leo, and a woman named Vanya who appeared to be in charge. They worked with military efficiency, packing my meager possessions into boxes and loading them into a van. I had so little that the entire process took less than 2 hours. My new apartment was beyond anything I could have imagined. Located in a restored brownstone, it occupied the entire 5th floor, an open-concept space with high ceilings, hardwood floors, and windows that bathed everything in natural light. The furniture was minimal but elegant, clearly chosen with care. A plush gray sectional facing a fireplace, a dining table that could seat 8, a king-sized bed with linens that felt like clouds against my skin. The kitchen was a chef's dream, with professional-grade appliances and enough counter space to prep a banquet. "Mr. Russo thought you might appreciate the kitchen," Vanya said, watching my stunned reaction. "He had it customized when the building was renovated." I ran my fingers over the marble countertops, trying to process the surreal turn my life had taken. "When was that?" "About 6 months ago." The timing made my stomach clench. 6 months ago, when Dante claimed to have first seen me. Had he been planning this all along? Was this apartment designed with me in mind? "There's a car at your disposal whenever you need it," Vanya continued, seemingly oblivious to my internal turmoil. "Just call this number." She handed me a sleek smartphone. "It's yours now. All the necessary contacts are programmed in." "I can't accept this," I said automatically, though I was already holding the phone. Vanya's expression remained professionally neutral. "Mr. Russo insists, for security purposes, he needs to be able to reach you at all times." The implication was clear. The phone, like the apartment, the car, the job itself, came with strings attached, invisible chains binding me to Dante Russo's world. After Vanya and her team left, I sat on the edge of the obscenely comfortable couch, trying to make sense of my new reality. In the span of a week, I had gone from anonymous dishwasher to executive chef with an apartment in Chelsea and a salary that could easily cover my father's medical bills. It was everything I had ever wanted, handed to me on a silver platter by a man who radiated danger and control in equal measure. A man who wanted something from me, something beyond my culinary skills. The new phone buzzed with a message. Dante's name appeared on the screen. "Dinner. 8 p.m. Wear the dress in your closet." No question, no invitation. Just another command from a man accustomed to being obeyed. I typed back, "Is this a business dinner?" His response came immediately. "Does it matter?" I stared at those 3 words, feeling their weight, understanding their implication. Yes, it mattered. It mattered because somewhere between his first appearance at Bellissimo and this moment, something had shifted between us. Something dangerous and exhilarating that had nothing to do with restaurants or careers. But before I could respond, another message appeared. "The line between professional and personal is already blurred, Harper. Has been since the moment I saw you." My heart pounded against my ribs as I read the words, hearing them in his voice. The phone buzzed again. "Say yes." 2 simple words that felt like so much more than a dinner invitation. They felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness, uncertain whether I would fly or fall. I typed back before I could change my mind. "Yes." The dress hanging in my closet was a masterpiece of understated elegance. Black silk that draped like water, with a neckline that hinted at décolletage without being obvious, a silhouette that skimmed my curves without clinging. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for me, which, I realized with a chill, it probably had been. Next to it hung a pair of Louboutin heels, and a delicate gold necklace with a small teardrop pendant. I didn't want to think about how Dante knew my shoe size, or how he had guessed exactly what style of jewelry I would choose for myself. At 7:45, the building's doorman called up to inform me that my car had arrived. Not Dante himself, but his driver, the broad-shouldered man I now knew as Anton. He nodded respectfully as I approached, opening the rear door without comment. "Where are we going?" I asked as we pulled away from the curb. Mr. Russo's residence, Miss Harper. A flicker of unease curled in my stomach. Dante's home, not a restaurant. The line between professional and personal blurring further. We drove uptown, eventually turning onto a tree-lined street on the Upper East Side where imposing townhouses stood shoulder to shoulder, their stately facades radiating old money and discretion. The car stopped in front of a 4-story brownstone, its exterior elegant but understated compared to its neighbors. No ostentatious decorations, just clean lines and impeccable maintenance. Anton escorted me to the door, which opened before he could knock. A middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun greeted us with a small nod. "Miss Harper," she said, her accent faintly Eastern European. "Mr. Russo is expecting you. Please follow me." The interior was a study in tasteful opulence. Herringbone hardwood floors covered with antique Persian rugs, walls adorned with what appeared to be original artwork, furniture that whispered of craftsmanship and heritage rather than shouting wealth. The house felt like a carefully curated museum, beautiful but untouched, as if no one truly lived there. The housekeeper led me through a series of rooms, each more impressive than the last, until we reached a set of double doors at the rear of the house. She knocked once, then opened them without waiting for a response. "Miss Harper has arrived, sir." I stepped into what appeared to be Dante's private domain, a wood-paneled study with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, and a sitting area arranged around a fireplace where flames danced merrily, casting warm light over the rich furnishings. Dante stood by one of the tall windows, silhouetted against the darkness outside. He turned as I entered, his gaze traveling over me with such intensity that I felt it like a physical touch. He wore a black suit, impeccably tailored to his broad shoulders and lean waist, with a crisp white shirt open at the collar. No tie, as had become his custom in my presence. "Harper," he said, my name a caress on his lips. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," I replied, fighting the warmth that spread through me at his approval. "The dress fits perfectly." I knew it would. He crossed the room to stand before me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. "Would you like a drink before dinner?" I nodded, grateful for anything that might calm my nerves. "Wine, please." He moved to a sidebar and poured 2 glasses of red wine from a decanter, the liquid gleaming like rubies in the firelight. "Italian, of course," he said, handing me one. "From a small vineyard near Florence that my family has patronized for generations." Our fingers brushed during the exchange, a fleeting touch that sent electricity skittering along my skin. I took a sip to hide my reaction, the wine exploding on my palate, rich, complex, with notes of cherry and oak and something earthier I couldn't quite identify. "It's incredible," I admitted. "I'll have cases delivered to the restaurant," he said, gesturing for me to sit on one of the leather sofas. "It would pair perfectly with your veal saltimbocca." He settled beside me, one arm stretched along the back of the sofa, not quite touching me but close enough that I was acutely aware of his presence. "How are you finding your new apartment?" "It's overwhelming," I answered honestly. "Everything is happening so fast." "Too fast?" There was a note in his voice I couldn't quite decipher. Concern, perhaps, or challenge. I met his gaze directly. "Why did you really bring me here tonight, Dante?" He considered me for a long moment, amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "Because I wanted to see you in that dress," he said finally. "Because I wanted to have you in my home, away from prying eyes and interruptions. Because every time I'm near you, I find it increasingly difficult to maintain the pretense that my interest in you is purely professional." The stark honesty of his response stole my breath. "I'm not sure what to say to that." "Say nothing," he suggested, taking my wine glass and setting it aside. "Just listen. Since that first day at Bellissimo, I haven't been able to get you out of my mind. Your resilience, your pride, your talent, everything about you calls to something in me I thought long buried." "You don't even know me," I protested weakly. "I know enough." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "I know you send every spare penny to your father's care facility. I know you sleep with a knife under your pillow because your first apartment in New York was broken into. I know you still make your grandmother's biscotti recipe on her birthday, even though she's been gone for 15 years. Each revelation was like a physical blow. How could you possibly know these things? I told you from the beginning. I know what I choose to know. He reached out, his fingertips ghosting along my bare shoulder. What I want to know now is what you're thinking. What you're feeling. I pulled away, standing abruptly. The room felt too warm, too close. I'm feeling manipulated, I said, anger finally breaking through my confusion. You've orchestrated every moment since you walked into Bellissimo. The job offer, the apartment, this dinner, it's all part of some game you're playing, and I don't even know the rules. Dante remained seated, watching me with those predator's eyes. Not a game, Harper. Never that. Then what? What do you want from me? He stood then, moving toward me with that fluid grace that reminded me of a jungle cat. Everything, he said simply. I want everything you're willing to give. Before I could respond, a discreet knock sounded at the door. The housekeeper entered, her expression carefully neutral. Dinner is served, sir. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at the interruption. Thank you, Irina. We'll be right in. When she had gone, he extended his hand to me. Shall we? I hesitated, knowing that taking his hand meant more than just walking to dinner. It meant stepping further into his world, with all its danger and allure. But I took it anyway, his palm warm and firm against mine, and let him lead me from the study. The dining room continued the theme of understated elegance. A table that could seat 12 set intimately for 2, crystal glimmering in the candlelight, fresh flowers scenting the air. Dante held my chair, his hands lingering on my shoulders for a moment, before he took his seat at the head of the table, close enough that our knees almost touched. Dinner was a 7-course affair, each dish more exquisite than the last. Handmade pasta with black truffles, seared sea scallops with saffron risotto, tender veal chops with roasted vegetables. The wine flowed freely, different vintages paired perfectly with each course. Throughout the meal, Dante watched me with undisguised fascination, as if my reactions to the food were more interesting than the food itself. We spoke of cuisine, of Italy, of the restaurant's upcoming opening, safe topics that nevertheless felt charged with undercurrents of meaning. It wasn't until dessert, a delicate panna cotta with fresh berries, that Dante steered the conversation into more dangerous waters. Tell me about your father, he said, refilling my wine glass. I stiffened, surprised by the sudden shift. What do you want to know? Whatever you're willing to share. I took a sip of wine, gathering my thoughts. He was a high school English teacher in Ohio. Loved literature, especially Shakespeare. Raised me alone after my mother left when I was 3. The memories were bittersweet. He was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 4 years ago. It progressed, quickly. And that's why you abandoned your career. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. The medical bills piled up. Insurance covered the basics, but not the specialized care he needed. So I came home from Florence, took whatever jobs I could find, and ended up washing dishes at Bellissimo. It paid the bills, barely. Dante's expression darkened. You deserved better. Life isn't about what we deserve, I countered. It's about what we can endure. An admirable philosophy, but unnecessarily fatalistic. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. Your father's care facility, Oakwood Gardens in Cleveland, they've been accommodating? A chill ran through me. How do you know where my father is? Answer the question, Harper. They're fine, I said cautiously. Understaffed, like most places, but they treat him well. Dante nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good, because as of yesterday they've received funding for additional staff and an expanded memory care unit. Your father will be moved to a private suite with round-the-clock nursing. I nearly dropped my wine glass. What did you do? I made a donation, he said casually, as if we were discussing the weather. A substantial one, earmarked specifically for Alzheimer's care. Why? My voice was barely above a whisper. Because it matters to you. His gaze held mine, unflinching. And you matter to me. The enormity of what he had done, what it meant, crashed over me like a wave. This wasn't just about a job, or an apartment, or even attraction. This was something deeper, more possessive, more dangerous. I can't accept this, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. It's too much. Too Controlling. His expression hardened. I'm not controlling you, Harper. I'm removing obstacles. Obstacles to what? To us. The word hung in the air between us, laden with implications. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. There is no us, Dante. There's you, orchestrating everything, and me, caught in your web. He rose as well, his height forcing me to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. Is that truly how you see this? As entrapment? What else would you call it? I demanded. You've systematically taken over every aspect of my life in less than a week. My job, my home, even my father's care. What's next? Will you decide what I eat, what I wear, who I speak to? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Be very careful, Harper. Or what? I challenged, recklessness born of wine and emotion making me bold. You'll fire me? Evict me? Withdraw your donation to my father's care facility? In one fluid motion, Dante closed the distance between us, his hands gripping my upper arms, not painfully but firmly enough that I couldn't easily pull away. I would never use your father as leverage, he said, his voice low and intense. Never. Do you understand me? I nodded, momentarily stunned by the vehemence in his tone. Everything I've done has been for you, not to control you. His grip softened, one hand moving to cup my cheek. Yes, I want you, but not as a possession or a puppet. I want your fire, your spirit, your defiance. His thumb traced the curve of my lower lip, the touch sending shivers racing along my spine. Tell me to stop, he murmured, his face inches from mine. Tell me you feel nothing, and I'll have Anton drive you home this instant. You'll keep your job, your apartment, and your father's care will remain secured, no strings. I should have said it. Should have ended whatever this was before it consumed me entirely. But as I looked into his eyes, I couldn't form the words, because the truth was, I did feel something, a dangerous, exhilarating pull toward this man who had upended my life. I can't tell you that, I whispered. It was all the permission he needed. His lips claimed mine with a hunger that stole my breath, his arms encircling me, pulling me against the hard planes of his body. I responded with a fervor that surprised even me, my fingers tangling in his hair. A soft moan escaping my throat, the kiss deepened, becoming something primal and consuming. Dante backed me against the dining room wall, his body caging mine, one hand sliding down to grip my hip while the other cradled my head. I could feel his heart thundering against my chest, matching the frantic rhythm of my own. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, his eyes had darkened to the color of burnished gold. Tell me you want this, he demanded, his voice rough with desire. Tell me you want me. I want you, I admitted, the truth torn from somewhere deep inside me. God help me. I do. A triumphant smile curved his lips before he captured mine again, this kiss slower, but no less intense. His hands roamed my body, leaving trails of fire in their wake, as his mouth moved to my neck, my shoulder, the sensitive spot below my ear that made me gasp. Dante, I breathed, clutching at his shoulders as my knees threatened to give way. He lifted his head, his gaze burning into mine. Say it again, he commanded. My name. Dante. I repeated, loving the way it felt on my lips, the way his eyes darkened further at the sound. He swept me into his arms in one fluid motion, carrying me from the dining room toward a staircase I hadn't noticed before. I should have protested, should have insisted on slowing down, but his warmth, his scent, the solid strength of him against me silenced all rational thought. We had just reached the bottom of the stairs when a sharp knock sounded at the front door. Dante froze, his entire body tensing. Another knock, more insistent this time. Sir? Anton's voice called through the door. There's a situation that requires your immediate attention. Dante's jaw clenched, frustration evident in every line of his body as he carefully set me back on my feet. Wait here, he said, his voice clipped. He strode to the door, yanking it open with barely contained anger. This had better be important, he growled. Anton leaned in, speaking too quietly for me to hear. Whatever he said transformed Dante's expression from irritation to something cold and dangerous that sent a chill down my spine. "When?" Dante demanded, his voice hard as steel. More hushed conversation, then Dante nodded once. "Secure the house. No one in or out except our people." He turned back to me, his expression unreadable. "Harper, I need to attend to something. Anton will stay with you until I return." The abrupt shift disoriented me. "What's happening?" "Business," he said shortly. "I shouldn't be long." Before I could protest, he crossed back to me, cupping my face in his hands. "We're not finished," he promised, his voice dropping to a husky whisper that made my insides flutter. "Not by a long shot." He pressed a hard, possessive kiss to my lips, then was gone, leaving me alone with Anton, who studiously avoided my gaze. "Mr. Russo suggested you might be more comfortable in the library, Miss Harper," he said formally. "If you'll follow me?" I trailed after him, confusion and arousal warring within me. The library was another beautifully appointed room, with comfortable leather chairs and books lining every wall. Anton left me there with a decanter of brandy and strict instructions not to leave the room under any circumstances. As the door closed behind him, I sank into one of the chairs, trying to process the whirlwind of the evening. From Dante's confession to our heated embrace to his sudden departure, it was all happening too fast, leaving me dizzy and off balance. I poured myself a measure of brandy, hoping it might clear my head. As I sipped the amber liquid, my gaze wandered over the books surrounding me, noting with surprise the diversity of subjects: philosophy, history, art, literature in multiple languages. Dante Russo was clearly more than the dangerous criminal I had initially assumed. Something on his desk caught my eye. A silver frame, the only personal item in the otherwise meticulously organized space. I rose and crossed to examine it, curious about what Dante would choose to display. It was a photograph of a beautiful woman, with Dante's amber eyes, standing in a sunlit kitchen, flour dusting her hands as she smiled at the camera. His mother, I realized, the chef he had mentioned. She looked happy, vibrant, full of the same passion he had recognized in me. As I set the frame back on the desk, I noticed a folder lying open beside it. The name on the tab made my blood run cold. Harper Mitchell. My hands shook as I lifted the top page. It was a detailed report on my life, my education, my employment history, my financial situation, even my medical records. Pages of surveillance photos followed. Me leaving Bellissimo, shopping for groceries, visiting a coffee shop. My entire existence documented with clinical precision, but it was the final page that made my heart stop. A police report from 5 years ago, detailing the arrest of a man named Michael Davis for drunk driving and vehicular manslaughter. The victim, Elena Russo, Dante's mother, and beneath it, a handwritten note in precise, angular writing. Connection confirmed. Subject is daughter of Raymond Mitchell, English teacher who provided false alibi for Davis, resulting in reduced charges. Surveillance continues. The brandy glass slipped from my nerveless fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor as the terrible truth crashed over me. This was never about me, my cooking, or any attraction. This was about revenge. Dante Russo had orchestrated every moment of our interaction, from my job at Bellissimo to tonight's dinner, as part of an elaborate scheme to punish my father for something he'd done years ago, and I had fallen for it completely. I stood frozen beside Dante's desk, my mind racing to process this devastating revelation. The man who had swept into my life and transformed it completely. The job, the apartment, the attention, even my father's care. It had all been a calculated move in a revenge plot I hadn't even known existed. My father, the gentle English teacher who quoted Shakespeare and taught me to cook my grandmother's recipes, had apparently provided a false alibi that helped the man who killed Dante's mother escape proper justice. And now, Dante was using me to, what? Punish my father? Get close enough to exact some final vengeance? The sound of footsteps in the hallway jolted me into action. I quickly replaced the folder, positioning it exactly as I had found it, and hurried back to my chair, kicking the shards of broken glass under the desk. My hands trembled as I poured another measure of brandy into a fresh glass, trying to compose myself before the door opened. But it wasn't Dante who entered. It was Irina, the housekeeper, her severe expression softening slightly when she saw me. "Miss Harper, Mr. Russo called to say his business will take longer than anticipated. He has asked me to prepare a guest room for you." "That won't be necessary," I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. "I'd prefer to go home." Irina frowned. "Mr. Russo was very clear that you should remain here until his return." Of course he was. Now that I understood his true motives, his controlling behavior made perfect sense. I was a chess piece in his game, and he wouldn't want me leaving the board. "I'm afraid I insist," I said, standing. "Please have Anton bring the car around." The woman hesitated, clearly torn between my wishes and her employer's commands. "I will speak to Anton," she said finally. "Please wait here." As soon as she left, I moved swiftly to Dante's desk and took out my phone, quickly photographing the contents of my file. Evidence of his deception, his true motives. Then, acting on impulse, I slipped the photograph of his mother into my clutch. I wasn't sure why. Perhaps as leverage, or perhaps because some part of me still wanted to understand the man behind the manipulation. Anton appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Harper, Mr. Russo has instructed that you stay here." "Mr. Russo doesn't own me," I retorted, anger finally breaking through my shock. "I am leaving. You can either drive me, or I'll call a taxi." Something like respect flickered in the bodyguard's eyes. "Very well. I'll take you home." The drive to my Chelsea apartment was silent, my mind churning with questions and revelations. How much of Dante's interest in me had been genuine? Had every interaction, every touch, every heated glance been part of his plan? And what was his endgame? As the car pulled up outside my building, Anton turned to face me. "Miss Harper," he said quietly, "I feel I should warn you. Mr. Russo does not take defiance well." "Is that a threat?" "An observation," he replied. "Be careful." I hurried up to my apartment, locking and chaining the door behind me. Only then did I allow the tears to come, hot and angry, as I paced the beautiful space that now felt like a gilded cage. Everything around me, the furniture, the kitchen, the clothes in my closet, all of it tainted by Dante's deception. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Dante. I let it ring through to voicemail. It immediately rang again and again. After the fourth call, a text message appeared. "Answer your phone, Harper." I typed back, "Leave me alone." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. "I'm coming over." Panic surged through me. I didn't want to face him, not yet. Not until I understood everything. I needed answers from the one person who might have them, my father. I dialed the number for Oakwood Gardens, fingers trembling. It was past visiting hours, but the night nurse had always been kind to me. "Margaret, it's Harper Mitchell. I need to speak to my father. It's urgent." "Harper, honey, it's nearly midnight." Margaret's voice was gentle but concerned. "Your father was quite agitated earlier. We had to give him something to help him sleep. Please," I begged. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." There was a long pause, then a sigh. "All right. Give me a few minutes to see if I can wake him." While I waited, I paced the apartment, mind racing. I needed to know the truth before confronting Dante. I needed to understand what my father had done and why. "Harper." My father's voice was slurred with medication and confusion when he finally came on the line. "Is something wrong, sweetheart? Dad?" I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I need to ask you about something that happened 5 years ago. A man named Michael Davis. You provided an alibi for him after he was involved in a car accident." Silence stretched across the line, so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then I heard a soft, broken sound. My father crying. "How did you find out?" he whispered. My heart sank. "So it's true. Not the way you think?" His words were halting, confused. Some days he was lucid, his old self shining through the fog of his disease. Other days he was lost in time, unable to recognize me. Tonight he seemed caught somewhere in between. Michael was my student. Troubled boy, brilliant writer. "Dad, Focus. The accident. The woman who died. Elena, he murmured, and the familiar way he said the name sent a chill through me. Beautiful Elena. You knew her? I asked, stunned. Loved her, he replied, the simple declaration stealing my breath. We were meeting in secret. Her husband, dangerous man, controlling. She was leaving him. The pieces began to fall into place, forming a picture more complex and heartbreaking than I had imagined. Dad, what happened that night? Michael borrowed my car, took it without permission. I was with Elena at her studio. She was a chef, had this little test kitchen above her restaurant. His voice drifted, lost in memory. When I heard about the accident, that she was dead, I couldn't think straight. The police came asking questions. I panicked. Said I'd loaned Michael my car, that he was with me earlier than he really was. Why? I whispered, though I already knew the answer, because I was afraid of her husband. Afraid he'd find out we were together, blame me for her trying to leave. The detective kept asking where I was when the accident happened, who I was with. I couldn't tell them I was with Elena without exposing everything. A sob broke through his voice. I was a coward, Harper, and because of me, that boy got only 3 years instead of the 20 he deserved. My father had lied to protect himself, not out of any loyalty to his student. But in doing so, he had denied Dante the justice he deserved for his mother's death. Dad? Elena's husband? His name was Dante? No, my father said, confusion evident in his tone. Alessandro Russo, powerful man in the import business. Everyone was afraid of him. And they had a son? I pressed, trying to make sense of the timeline. Dante, my father confirmed. Teenager when I knew Elena, devoted to his mother. She talked about him all the time, how talented he was, how much he loved cooking with her. He paused, his breath hitching. Harper, why are you asking about this now? After all these years? Before I could answer, there was a sharp knock at my door. Dante. I knew it without checking. Dad, I have to go. We'll talk more soon. I love you. I ended the call as the knocking grew more insistent. For a moment, I considered not answering, pretending I wasn't home. But Dante would find a way in, I had no doubt about that. Better to face him on my terms. I steeled myself, straightening my shoulders as I approached the door. Through the peephole, I could see Dante standing in the hallway, his expression thunderous. I took a deep breath and opened the door, leaving the security chain in place. What do you want? My voice was steadier than I expected. Dante's amber eyes, so like his mother's, burned with barely contained fury. Let me in, Harper. No. Say what you came to say from there, his jaw clenched. You went through my personal files. And you've been investigating every aspect of my life for months, I countered. Planning your revenge on my father by using me. Something shifted in his expression. Surprised, perhaps, that I had put the pieces together so quickly. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me, I demanded. Explain how using me to get to my father is anything but manipulation and revenge. Dante ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration that cracked his composed facade. Let me in, Harper. I don't want to have this conversation in the hallway. Against my better judgment, I closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it. Dante stepped inside, his presence immediately filling the apartment. He looked different than he had at dinner. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Did you know who I was when you came to Bellissimo that night? I asked, keeping my distance. Yes. No hesitation. No attempt to lie. I've known about you for years, and everything since then. The job, this apartment, my father's care. It was all to, what, get close enough to hurt him through me? Dante moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Initially, yes, he admitted, his back to me. I wanted Alessandro to pay for what happened to my mother, but he died 3 years ago, heart attack. I was left with no one to blame, no way to find justice. He turned, his eyes finding mine. Until I discovered that the teacher who provided the false alibi had a daughter, a chef, like my mother. The parallel wasn't lost on me. So you decided to use me instead. That was the plan. His voice was flat, emotionless. Get close to you, make you depend on me, then reveal the truth about your father. Watch everything crumble around you, the way it did for me when I lost her. A cold feeling settled in my chest. And now? Is that still the plan? Dante crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just short of touching me. Everything changed the moment I saw you in person, he said, his voice dropping to that intimate register that had always affected me so powerfully. The way you moved, the fire in your eyes when I challenged you, you were nothing like I expected. And that made a difference? It made all the difference. His hand rose as if to touch my cheek, then dropped when I flinched away. I still wanted to be close to you, but the motivation changed. I found myself wanting to know you. The real you. Not just the image I'd constructed as Alessandro's revenge. Your father, I said, the pieces clicking into place. That's whose business you took over. The family business isn't just a euphemism. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Perceptive. Yes, Alessandro built the organization I now run. When he died, I inherited everything. His business, his wealth, his enemies, and his vendetta against my father. That too. Dante's eyes held mine, unflinching. But somewhere along the way, Harper, you became more important than the vendetta. Tonight, when we were together, there was no plan, no manipulation, just you and me. I wanted to believe him. Despite everything, despite the lies and manipulation, some part of me responded to the raw sincerity in his voice. But I couldn't simply forget the file, the surveillance photos, the calculated way he had inserted himself into my life. I spoke to my father tonight, I said, watching Dante carefully. He told me something interesting, that he and your mother were having an affair. That she was planning to leave your father for him. Dante went completely still, shock evident in every line of his body. That's a lie, he said. But uncertainty had crept into his voice. Is it? He knew details about her test kitchen above the restaurant, how she loved cooking with you. He called her beautiful Elena with such tenderness. No. Dante shook his head, denial etched on his features. She would have told me if she was unhappy, if she was planning to leave. Would she? If she was afraid of your father? If she was trying to protect you? Dante sank onto the sofa, the weight of this new perspective visibly crushing him. It doesn't change what your father did, he said finally. He still lied to protect himself. Because of him, the man who killed my mother served only 3 years. I know, I acknowledged, taking a seat across from him. What my father did was wrong, cowardly, but he's paying for it now, in his own way, losing himself piece by piece to a disease that will eventually erase everything he ever was. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken thoughts and emotions. Finally, I reached into my clutch and withdrew the photograph I had taken from his desk. I took this, I admitted, holding it out to him. I shouldn't have, but I wanted to see her, to understand. Dante took the frame, his fingers brushing mine in the exchange. He stared at his mother's smiling face, grief etched in the lines of his own. She taught me to make pasta when I was 5, he said softly. Said my hands knew instinctively how to feel when the dough was perfect. Just like yours do. The simple, personal memory touched me more than any of his grand gestures. This was the real Dante, not the calculating manipulator or the dangerous mafia boss, but the son who had loved his mother, who had lost her too soon. I can't be part of your revenge, Dante, I said gently. I won't be used to hurt my father, no matter what he did. And if that's no longer what I want? He looked up, his eyes vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. If what I want now is just you, Harper, not as a pawn or a means to an end, but as the woman who reminds me that there can be passion and purpose beyond vengeance. My heart stuttered in my chest. I don't know if I can trust that. Trust you. Then let me earn your trust, he said, leaning forward, intensity radiating from him. No more secrets, no more manipulation. Just us, building something real together. And my father. Dante's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. His care continues. regardless of what happens between us. That's not leverage. It's atonement. For both our father's sins. I studied him, searching for any sign of deception. But all I saw was raw honesty, vulnerability, and something that looked remarkably like hope. The restaurant, I said. Was that real, or just part of the plan? It started as part of the plan, he admitted. But it's become something more. A tribute to my mother, yes, but also a beginning for us, if you still want it. Did I? Could I possibly build something meaningful with a man who had entered my life under such false pretenses? A man whose world was so different from anything I had known before? As if reading my thoughts, Dante reached for my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately, he said, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. I'm asking for a chance to show you who I really am, not Alessandro's son seeking revenge, not the man who orchestrated our meeting, but the man I've become since knowing you. I looked into his eyes, those amber eyes so like his mother's, and saw genuine remorse, and beneath it, something deeper that made my breath catch. I can't promise anything, I said cautiously, but I won't walk away, not yet. Relief washed over his features, followed by determination. That's all I ask. Time to prove myself worthy of your trust. He raised my hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to my knuckles. The gesture was simple, but weighted with promise, of honesty, of effort, of a future neither of us had anticipated when this strange journey began. The restaurant opens in 6 weeks, I said, finding solid ground in the practical. We have a lot of work to do, Dante smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face, making him look younger, unburdened. We do, he agreed. Partners? The word hung between us, laden with meaning beyond business. I hesitated only a moment before nodding. Partners. 6 weeks later, I stood in the gleaming kitchen of Eliana's, named for Dante's mother, directing my staff with the confidence I had once thought lost forever. Through the service window, I could see the dining room filling with New York's elite, eager to experience the city's most anticipated restaurant opening of the year. Dante appeared at my side, impeccable in a charcoal suit, his eyes warm as they met mine. Ready? The weeks since that night in my apartment had been a delicate dance of rebuilding trust, of learning each other's truths rather than assumptions. We had worked side by side, creating something beautiful from the ashes of our shared tragedy. And along the way, something unexpected had bloomed between us. Something real, based on mutual respect and understanding rather than manipulation or revenge. I was still cautious, still learning to trust him completely. But each day brought new revelations. His dry humor when relaxed, his unfailing support of my culinary vision, his surprising gentleness when speaking of my father, whom he had visited twice now in Ohio. Ready, I confirmed, adjusting my chef's coat, white with black piping and my name embroidered in gold thread over the heart. A gift from Dante. He leaned in, pressing a brief, tender kiss to my lips. Then let's begin. As I turned to my staff, calling out final instructions before our first service, I caught sight of our reflection in the polished steel of the refrigerator. Dante and me, standing shoulder to shoulder, both of us finally visible to each other in all our complex, flawed humanity. It wasn't a perfect ending. There were still scars to heal, trust to rebuild, demons to face. But it was a beginning, honest and real in a way that nothing between us had been before, and for now, that was enough. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive, no longer invisible, but seen, valued, and chosen, not as a pawn in someone else's game, but as the woman I had always been beneath the exhaustion and struggle, the woman Dante had ultimately recognized beyond his own blinding need for revenge. And as I stepped forward to begin the first service at Eliana's, I knew that whatever came next, whatever challenges we faced individually or together, we would face them exactly as we stood now. Partners in the truest sense of the word.